Okay, so I am Marc Fliedner. I am a candidate for Brooklyn DA. I am proud to be. I live over in Bay Ridge now, where my mom is in a nursing home. She's got the most late stages of Alzheimer's, and my 87-year-old Korean War vet dad lives with my husband, Steve, and I. Steve's a music educator, and I've been working in criminal justice for 30 years. I have a very specific mission, and it is nothing short of changing the way we do the business of criminal justice in Brooklyn. The system is broken. It has never been a system that afforded equal justice to people from all phases of our community. And specifically, I have great concerns about the fact that there are people who are more impoverished and don't have access to the resources that others have, and that tends to fall into the communities of color, and it has never been equalized. And so what I want you to be doing, I'm going to give you a heads up to do it, because I'm the first to speak, right? I want you to be listening tonight to whether people seem to be saying we're doing well enough, or we're doing pretty good with this. Or, even more than that, I want to go back to doing what I was doing a decade or several years ago in the Brooklyn DA's office, because that sounds way too much like, you know, that let's make America great again hat. And the plain and simple fact is, if you are somebody that's from a lower income, or you are somebody who is from one of the disenfranchised communities that we all tend to, as good progressives in this room, align ourselves with, the system has never been equal. It has always been broken. And I want to change it, and we can do it in Brooklyn. And here's the amazingly wonderful part, is that we're going to take all of this progressive energy that we have as a result of November, and we are going to use it in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is the third largest district attorney's office in the nation. I don't know if you guys knew that. And we all know how wonderfully big and diverse and culturally alive Brooklyn is. If we can do it here with the media access that we have, we will change the national conversation about issues of equal justice in this nation. Let me talk about how we're going to do it. But first, let me start by telling you enough about myself so you know that I'm the person to do it. Back in the mid to early 80s, I was in college, and a friend of mine said, a woman said to me, really good friend, you need to take this course that I just took called Dealing with Sexual Assault. It was in the School of Nursing, because in the early 80s, there was no victim advocacy as a known entity, okay? So I took it, and it was incredibly eye-opening to me. It actually changed my life, as sometimes college or high school or grad school courses can do. We learned about how sexual assault has always historically been used as a tool of degradation and power, sometimes as a way to control things in war. And I left that course with an incredible instructor saying, I want to be an advocate. I want to be a victim advocate. I want to be the voice for people when, because something traumatic has happened to them, they don't have the ability to speak in this unusual, unknown place called the criminal justice system. So I want to be a prosecutor. And so I put all my energies toward that, went to George Washington Law School. In 1986, Elizabeth Holtzman, who was a DA back in the day, recruited me from GW. She wanted a national level DA's office. She wanted a place where people were coming from all over the place, driven to do unique work that was based on trying to get equality of justice. And so all of these young folks, when I came, and it was the 80s, man, a lot of you weren't around for it, but it was so different from now. We were chasing way too many homicides. When you hear about a weekend in Chicago now, it's a little bit too much like that every day in Brooklyn. And so I learned fast. I became an expert, not surprisingly, in sex crimes, child abuse, and then within the Special Victims Unit, domestic violence as well. And then I actually went back to New Jersey, where I'd originally come from, and Monmouth County, New Jersey, and I ran a sex crimes and child abuse unit. You showing me time?
Just 1 minute.
I got 1 minute left? All right. Here's the deal. I got to cut to it. This is what we need to do. We need to be constructive about what we're doing with our cases. We need to be assessing cases early on and work, not only lawyers, but social services people looking at a case and saying, what drove the criminal conduct? If it was mental health, if it was substance abuse, if it was poverty, if it was lack of access to resources or jobs or, or education, we need to figure that into the disposition and make sure that we are not churning people through this for-profit system that wants to incarcerate people for years, turn them into these institutionalized people, put them back out on the street, no better. None of us are safer for that, and they're no better for it. We need to bring a sense of humanity and always equality to everything we do in the district attorney's office. Sadly, it's going to be new, and it's going to happen when I'm in charge. Thank you. Please come up with some questions about specific issues. Please.
So, Mark, I am going to start off by just asking you 2 questions, and then we're going to go ahead and open it up to membership. But my 2 questions are tied, so I'm going to give them to you at the same time. So, what specific policies did former DA Ken Thompson have that you would aim to continue, and what do you think could be done better? What can we build on?
Okay, great. Well, I'm the progressive in the race, and I want you to be listening so that you can check that against what I'm saying. The idea that Mr. Thompson put forth, saying that marijuana in your pocket for personal use is something that should not be prosecuted and that he was not going to prosecute, and then saying to the NYPD, we're not going to do it, so stop making the arrests. Of course I want to continue that. Why? Because those kinds of offenses are used as a pretense to be able to get some people in the criminal justice system who shouldn't be at their age and their station. But I'm a guy that will tell you, broken windows and that broad caveat, I want to go further than just marijuana offenses. Turnstile offenses in certain cases where things can be resolved, right then and there by a police officer who's got a little bit of, and understands that the DA's office is going to use discretion. Possession of a syringe. I'm just thinking of certain offenses that are low level, that should be a ticket. They should not have somebody getting into the system, being processed, being warehoused, and then being subject to a bail that may be actually holding them in jail, not just to make sure that they come back to court, which is the only legitimate basis for bail, but basically penalizing them for being poor, right? Punishing in advance. So I want to take that further in terms of the low-level offenses. The conviction review that he got in place has to stay in place, because there's nothing worse than when somebody's constitutional rights were violated in the context of a trial or a disposition. But what I'm concerned about is that we're spending so much time looking at the tail end of what happened back then that we're not spending enough time looking at what happens in the beginning. And that's why I alluded to doing something very different when the case is first assessed and comes into the system, okay? Because what we need to do is not only have an experienced assistant district attorney look carefully at whether constitutional rights were violated, at whether the evidence is sound and credible, at whether there's corroborative supporting evidence of it, whether the identification procedure was done properly, or the statement taken without any coercion, those kinds of things, but also look at what drove the criminal conduct, so we can guide the case from the very beginning toward alternatives to incarceration and alternatives to bail. And that's why I'm going to have somebody who's going to work in the early assessment section of the office, who's actually a social services person, who can look for those clues, not only of what the charged individual, the defendant, if you will, may need as a constructive disposition, but also looking at what the victims and witnesses who may have been traumatized need in those hours and then days after the incident. So I hope I've answered your question, because there are things that I absolutely want to keep but move further, and then there's a shift that I want to make toward the beginning of the case. I have a program that you're gonna, if you want to pull up my website, I invite people to do it. I'll shout the website if you ever give me a chance. But in the first 36 hours, there are certain things that have to happen to steer the case properly, and within 36 days, I call it 36 and 36, everyone will have a fair plea offer. So they're not sitting in jail pre-trial and really being kept there for months and months and months, simply because they don't want to plead to that felony that they know is going to follow them for the rest of their lives and preclude them from certain kinds of employment and certain kinds of voting rights and things like that. So that's my answer to your 2 questions. Yeah.
So, just because unfortunately we're running short on time, there's so many candidates to get through.
Yeah.
Maybe turn it over to the audience for one question, because we're already a little bit past that 10-minute time limit, unfortunately.
Sure.
So that's okay.
Yeah. If you could just state your name before you ask the question.
My name's Sarah Lilly. I really appreciate everything you just said about the things that you want to change. I'm curious what crimes you feel that you would be more aggressive on.
Thank you.
Just as a counterweight to what you're
Thank
talking
you.
about trying to...
When I left the office, I was the chief of civil rights. That meant hate crimes and police misconduct. I was on the trial team, and I was the first one to be at the scene of where Peter Liang shot a Kai Gurley in the dark stairwell in the pink houses and tried other police misconduct cases. I am gravely concerned, I want to say gravely concerned, about what the current DA's office is doing with those two categories of crime. Because since I walked away from the office in June of 2016 to start my own civil rights practice, out of concern about what was going on, and I'll explain what I mean, the hate crimes were being diminished. We were not, the unit has actually shrunk since I left. You've seen how the hate crimes are exploding. You see all of the different members of allied groups that we have that we're concerned about who are being victimized. That is to be a separate freestanding bureau with culturally competent people in charge of that bureau. And the police misconduct. Let me be clear. I proceeded with cases. We proceeded aggressively because simply when there has been a violation of the public trust, it has to be held accountable for, just like everybody's accountable in the rest of the system. And I was given an answer when I brought cases to the current acting district attorney and said, we need to proceed with these. We need to look at these. I was told, we're not proceeding with police cases for the next few months. That was something that offended me on an ethical level and was inconsistent with the mandate that I had been given by Mr. Thompson. And it cannot be. If a police officer does something wrong, they need to be held accountable like everybody else. If only, I mean, for many different reasons, certainly because the community needs to have that trust and that comfort that there will be a fairness in what happens with them, but also because it makes life difficult for all the other police officers that are trying to do their work out there. So the hate crimes and police misconduct are something that are near and dear to my heart. All civil rights violations need to be prosecuted very aggressively, as long as they've been investigated carefully, and we've got our evidence.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys, so much.